Good morning. Thanks so much for waking up with Boston 25 Morning News, 8 a.m. on Sunday, October 21st. It's gloomy out there, but an exciting week ahead of baseball. I'm Heather Hedgedas.
And I'm Jason Law. Yeah, big week ahead. We'll get to the World Series now set in just a few minutes. But Jason Brewer tracking some pretty cold temperatures out there, only 40 degrees at Logan.
Jason, thank you. Breaking this morning, at least 17 people are dead this morning after a train derailed in Taiwan. More than 100 others are injured and are now being treated at 4 different hospitals there. According to Reuters, the train cars overturned in Yailong County, which is near a popular tourist area on the country's east coast. Some breaking news right now. This just into our newsroom. One person is dead, another injured in a double shooting in Mattapan. Now, we know it happened just before 4:30 this morning on Osceola Street. Breaking news this morning, as we were just saying moments ago, there were no winners in last night's billion-dollar Mega Millions jackpot, but there were more than a dozen million-dollar winners, including one in New Hampshire. So now the jackpot for Tuesday night's drawing is set to be worth $1.6 billion. So if you want to check your ticket, go ahead. Here are the winning numbers right here. 15, 23, 53, 65, 70, and the mega ball was 7.
The suspect is also in custody this morning.
And this morning, Boston 25 News reporter Natalie Rubino is live outside UMass Memorial Medical Center in Worcester with details, Natalie, on the string of crimes that led to this violent encounter. Well, firefighters took on some major flames at Logan Airport yesterday, and at first glance, this may have appeared to be a real serious disaster that they were dealing with, but fortunately, this was all a mock training drill that looked very real. Well, 2 men are in custody right now as police continue to investigate a drive-by shooting that happened on the West Roxbury-Dedham line. What we know is state police and SWAT teams are responding to that area. Heavy police presence. They've been out there since just about 4 in the morning. Boston 25 News reporter Michael Henrich is live at the scene where the situation began unfolding. And Michael, it's still a very active situation. Michael, I just got some new information from a law enforcement source that police are saying this suspect got in by breaking a window. Just last week, she squashed the idea. There was a web chat with David Axelrod, of course, President Obama's former advisor. He said, "Are you going to run? Could anything convince you to run?" She repeated a couple of times, "I'm not running." Do you believe her?
Patriots' 7th straight AFC championship game. Of course, the Jaguars have never won a championship game. They're trying to make it to their first Super Bowl here. That would normally be the storyline. But this past week, of course, the storyline's been all about Tom Brady and his hand and the question about whether he'll be playing, first of all, whether he'll be wearing his glove during the game, and how he will overcome all of this.
Plainridge is a smaller casino than what you're probably used to. The casino floor is 44,000 square feet, and that's about the size of a football field, goal line to goal line. It's also about an eighth of the size of Mohegan Sun or Foxwoods in Connecticut. So the question is, how will Plainridge compete? The wire mesh is extremely difficult to cut, and not just because this is steel right here, but because, as you can see with these bolt cutters, it's difficult to get cutters in because of the specialized narrow spacing. Even the menu looks like a restaurant menu. You'll also find things on it like berry lime muffins, cornbread, coming soon toaster waffles. They're trying to cater to customers, they say, who are sick and may have a compromised appetite. The old ladder had openings, which was perfect for little fingers to grab onto. But the new ladder has been completely filled in, and there's nowhere that a child can grip. Having arrived here only a few minutes after this explosion occurred, just really how chaotic it was in the moments afterwards. My photographer, Mike Bowen, and I were rushing towards the scene, towards the finish line, and hundreds, if not thousands of people were rushing the other way past us. One other question, is the public, I mean, everybody needs to know this, is the public safe, or are there other suspects out there, Commissioner Davis?
There's no evidence to indicate there are other suspects out there. The public can relax.
Former Giants and Buccaneers player Jeff Hatch says he did whatever it took to stay in the game, and his struggles with addiction nearly cost him his life. Now he's demanding the NFL take action to help other players before it's too late.
I've seen a lot of guys die, you know, and it's tough because I get it. That's my story, but it doesn't have to be that way.
His story starts with a guy who had everything going for him, an All-American at Penn, drafted by the Giants in 2002.
Did you get to pick 76 as your number?
Well, my college number was 75.
Jeff Hatch started getting attention in the early 2000s after he was featured in the ESPN documentary, Hey Rookie, Welcome to the NFL. After the Giants, he went on to play for Tampa Bay. He was living out his dream, but the physical pain was tremendous.
Imagine putting your body through a 35-mile-per-hour car crash 65 times in a day and waking up the next morning knowing you have to do it again.
He suffered a severe back injury, but it wasn't hard getting his hands on prescription drugs.
A trainer, a teammate, a hanger-on who wants to be friends and provide a service.
Especially in the NFL, where working through the pain is part of the job.
That's part of how you gain value in that world.
Right.
This is a guy who can play hurt. And part of that is taking opiates.
And suddenly, this Ivy League grad was hooked on painkillers.
Take 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 hours as needed for pain. And then I remember the day that I went, yeah, but this will probably help with the emotional pain I'm feeling right now too.
And when that injury spelled the end of his career at just 26 years old,
I woke up every day hoping I would die. And I tried to drug myself to death.
his parents found him in his Tampa Bay townhome, nearly dead from an overdose. They got him help, and today, Jeff is clean.
And how
Yeah.
long have you been sober?
11 and a half years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now he tours the country speaking to kids about drugs, and he works for Granite Recovery Centers in New Hampshire helping other addicts.
Because he's a soldier for recovery. He's tireless, you know, he day in, day out, he's out there carrying the message. He really is a warrior for this thing.
But Jeff's worried about current NFL players, especially the ones who get cut.
So that's what this is about for me. It's about trying to help those guys that I know are suffering in silence.
He says the NFL isn't doing enough to make sure players suffering from addiction get treatment, or to end the current culture where he says locker rooms can be candy stores.
Many Heisman Trophy winners that I have, hey bro, I need a couple. Here you go, brother.
Jeff is calling on the NFL to provide recovery coaches and attack the problem aggressively. He recently stole a moment with Commissioner Roger Goodell and asked him to do more. He says Goodell was receptive.
I couldn't ask for a better reaction from him. But it's a big business he's running.
So why do you think the NFL hasn't addressed this?
I think they haven't addressed it because they feel like they have bigger fish to fry. What I would say to you is wrong. These guys are dying. But because these are men that if they can get well and get right, will have an opportunity to help so many other people.
So the NFL has a partnership with an addiction recovery center in Florida, and the NFL tells me players can receive financial assistance for recovery. And the NFL Players Association also has a substance abuse program, but Hatch says from what he's seen, players need to seek out the treatment, and he says, again, often players need someone to intervene. I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News.
This particular type of prison is hell because of the way it functions, its mission to break down human beings.
This former prisoner calls it hell in a very small place. A 12 by 7 foot cell, just a slot for food, a concrete bed, toilet, shower, and a black and white TV.
Living in a room the size of your bathroom.
That's solitary confinement in the highest security prison in the nation, the federal Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, at the foothills of the Rockies. If Johar Tsarnaev is sent there, he'll be joining shoe bomber Richard Reed, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, Olympic bomber Eric Rudolph, and 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui.
Now, this is not a country club prison. This is
some video from inside, but with access so limited, the only way to really know what life is like there is to hear about it through the eyes of someone who spent a lot of time there.
This is ADX.
Ray Luke Levasseur spent 5 years in the 90s in Florence, also known as ADX, short for Administrative Maximum Facility. In the late 70s and 80s, Ray led a political organization responsible for 8 bombings in the Boston area.
Well, these are 7 of us were charged in Boston.
We found Ray 4 hours from Boston in rural Waldo, Maine.
So I got a job as a logger.
Now a free man. But his years at ADX are something he will carry with him to his grave, calling them some of the longest years of his life. Prisoners there spend 23 hours a day in isolation.
What does 23 hours a day by yourself do to your mind?
Well, it's going to warp it in some ways. The same way, because it's a traumatic experience.
Ray calls the prisoners' cells boxcar cells and says by design, they effectively shut off the human senses.
Where there's a solid door. So you cannot, step up to the bars in your cell and holler to another prisoner at another part of the tier you're on. You can't see anything. You can't look left or right at all.
Give me a sense of a typical day. inside a boxcar?
It produces this nightmarish mindset that I think has a tendency to get more into the paranoid and the violent.
Prisoners can earn time in a rec yard for good behavior, but they're never allowed there together.
Dog kennels, that's exactly what they are. If you went to a dog kennel, you'd see exactly the same thing, these wired runs, you know, maybe 20, 25 feet long, very narrow.
It's a sort of 21st century Alcatraz.
8 years ago, 60 Minutes spoke with former warden Robert Hood, the only ADX warden to ever speak publicly.
I don't know what hell is, but I do know that you know the assumption would be for a free person, would be pretty close to it.
And ADX is not without controversy. We Skyped with Colorado attorney Laura Rovner, who is representing a group of ADX prisoners suing over the conditions.
It's a place that can slowly drive you insane, even if you start out without having any sensible mental illness. It is a terrible, frightening, almost scientifically engineered form of isolation. It truly is a living death.
And that's exactly how Ray Levasseur describes it too.
You send a young man there that's 21, 22 years old, at some point they will think back and say, maybe I should have taken my shot with the death penalty.
To date, at least 7 prisoners have killed themselves inside ADX or Supermax, and many more have attempted suicide. As that former warden, Robert Hood, candidly told the New York Times, ADX or Supermax is not designed for rehabilitation. Our request to speak with the current warden, guards, or have any access inside were denied. I'm Heather Hedges, Fox 25 News. We are awaiting the penalty phase in the trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. If he is spared the death penalty, it could mean life in prison at the federal Supermax in Colorado, designed for this country's very worst criminals. Well, last night we showed you what life is like for prisoners inside and heard from one prisoner. We got his firsthand account of life inside there. Tonight, we hear from Liz Norden. Both of her sons lost a leg in the attack. So will the conditions change her mind about Tsarnaev's fate? We find out, all new at 6.
Prisoners can earn time in a rec yard for good behavior, but they're never allowed there together.
Wow.
Liz Norden has said all along she wants to see Dzhokhar Tsarnaev put to death. But still, she was curious about how Tsarnaev might live if he is given a life in prison sentence. So she made a point of watching our piece about the conditions at the federal Supermax prison where Tsarnaev could go. And after watching, Norden tells us she feels better about the prospects Tsarnaev could wind up there.
After seeing that and seeing what his life is going to be like, that might be a little easy, putting him to death.
This might actually make him suffer more.
Exactly.
This former prisoner calls it hell in a very small place. As we told you last night, the Supermax in Colorado is a solitary confinement prison, the highest security lockup in the U.S. Cells are just 12 by 7 feet, with just a sliver of a window and a solid steel door designed to shut off the human senses. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day alone. We tracked down one of the few to be released from there. Ray Luke Levasseur spent 5 years for his role in political bombings in the 70s and 80s.
So you think solitary confinement can make somebody more violent?
Absolutely, there's no question about it. It made me more violent. It gets turned inward, that violence gets turned inward so that there is a lot of suicides and attempted suicide.
And back to Liz Norden, she says 23 hours a day in solitude would at least give Dzhokhar Tsarnaev a lot of time to think about what he did.
I don't think it really changes my mind, but it puts my mind at ease that if he doesn't get the death penalty, that I know his life will be hell.
Liz says she can't speak for her sons about whether they want the death penalty or life in prison for Tsarnaev, but she does say that her son Paul watched our piece because he was also interested in seeing for himself what kind of conditions Dzhokhar Tsarnaev could be facing.
Good morning.
Morning. At 94 years young, Roland Martineau has led a full life. It hasn't always been an easy one, but he has a lot to be thankful for. 4 sons, 17 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren, and a great-great-grandbaby on the way.
And it's going to be a boy.
A boy?
Yep.
What's his name?
You want to join the Seabees?
Maybe.
Roland is a decorated Navy Seabee who served in the Pacific in World War II.
We went out and we looking for trouble, we found it. and we took care of it.
But the one thing Roland doesn't have is a high school diploma. He grew up in Leominster, and his mother passed away when he was young. His father took off.
I was off, and I was living with my grandma and grandfather, and they could ill afford keeping me in school. So when I got out of school, and I went to work.
He married and went off to war. When he returned home, he became a welder and never went back to school. He lost his wife 6 years ago.
Not getting his high school diploma is something Roland rarely talked about through the years, except for in here.
His barber of 15 years, Donna Salvi, and her boyfriend, Leominster firefighter Bobby Penning, started taking Roland out for a regular lunch. And that's when he told them about his small regret.
He's just an easy person to love. He reminded me a lot of my father, who would be about his age right now.
They decided to make getting that diploma for Roland their mission. A lot more work than you might think.
I went to the the Veteran Center of Leominster, and then I went to the mayor's office. Then I went to the school department.
It was going to be a surprise, and then there was a problem. Roland recently contracted pneumonia.
He said when I went to see him in the hospital that he wasn't leaving the hospital this time. And so we kind of told him, we said, Pepe, you have a really big surprise coming up. You have to hang on.
Within a day, Roland's health had turned around completely. Now he's back home, and on June 2nd, he'll walk across the stage at Leominster High School's graduation. It's been 70 years in the making. And Donna is going to make sure Roland looks great in his cap and gown.
He says, I can't wait to get my hair cut the day before my graduation.
In Leominster, I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News.